Okay.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Rabbi Howard Steyer, and we're here for the funeral service of Gary Hobish. On behalf of his sisters, I want to welcome you. And I want to offer my condolences to you, Tova, and you, Carol, as well as Gary's many, many friends. It's easy to be at a loss for words when you're with mourners or when you're grieving. So I typically turn to Jewish texts or things I've learned to share from our tradition, because our tradition has much wisdom to share in these emotional settings. I find it quite appropriate that last week's Torah portion was Lech Lecha, which means go forth. Why are we being taught to leave where we are and venture out? It's the human condition to crave to be in relationship. Through interacting with others, we learn from them. We gain insights into their perspectives on life, which in turn gives us needed reflections on our own lives. And it allows us to perhaps empathize and identify with experiences outside of our own. Gary so wonderfully modeled venturing forth and engaging with a wide swath of folks. His sister Carol told me he was referred to as, quote, the man of San Francisco. Fortunately, Gary didn't rest on his laurels, but continued engaging with others, including mentoring younger people getting into the arts. Judaism teaches that though a person dies, in truth, they're not gone. They live on in the hearts and the souls of the lives they touch. Gary's absence truly is a loss, for he's no longer here. But at this time and in the days which follow, we can be grateful for the positive memories Gary leaves behind. No matter how sudden or traumatic the end may have been, Any death is difficult. The time immediately after a loved one's passing, particularly one that came unexpectedly. This time can be overwhelming. Many people find consolation in Psalm 23, so I would like to read this contemporary rendition. My life is guided by invisible hands. Shall I want more? I'm comforted by cool blades of soft green grass. Quiet waters nourish my soul, feeding me now and for eternity. Through the beauty of nature, my soul is revived. When I do my best, I travel along paths of justice. Though now I traverse the valley of death, I'm not afraid. The shoulders of those before me carry me through fear. As I exhale long and deep, I am consoled. As I face the unknown, I'm reassured knowing the bounty of the universe has been placed before me. My mind, my heart are full, my thanks overflow. Oh, may I be wrapped in blessings of goodness and fullness all of my days, and I will dwell forever in gratitude and in peace. I now would like to read a poem by Rabbi Jacob Rudy, one which I personally find particularly meaningful as I live my own life. And before I proceed with his poem, I'm going to invite those of you in the back who are standing, if you care for a seat, there's many seats in the front row, and a couple more scattered about if you'd like to come forward. Death will come. Its hand will not be stayed even an instant, nor can we enter into judgment with it. Our question why will go unanswered. But this does not mean that we are helpless in the face of death. We can and we do rob death of ultimate victory by living life as long as it is ours to live. To ask of death that it never come is futile, but it's not futility to pray that when death comes from us, it may take us from a world one corner of which is a little better because we were there. When we're dead and people weep for us and grieve, let it be because we touched their lives with beauty and simplicity. Let it not be said that life was good to us, but rather that we were good to life. And it certainly seems like Gary was indeed good to life. Carol, I love learning about you and your siblings' upbringing. You shared with me about Old Bethpage on Long Island, where you all attended and participated in theater as a family. The love of comedy which came from your parents, Stan and Rosalind, who would play comedy records such as Alan Sherman and The 2,000-Year-Old Man. And I have to say, this rabbi looks forward to listening to and laughing to You Don't Have to Be Jewish. Never heard of that record. I love learning that your grandfather, Sam, gave your brother a reel-to-reel tape recorder, which set Gary off on his life's path to become a musician extraordinaire. And then you suggested that I look at his Facebook page to get further insight into his life. I was fascinated by seeing the wide range of his posts, and I'd like to mention three. First, a photo from 2015 with your parents in front of the Regal Kosher Deli. The pastrami looked great. I love seeing a musician posting about Nikola Tesla. And then there was a post dated September 26th of this year, just a little over a month ago, in which he used one of those online meme creators to fashion his own headstone. Sadly, he didn't make it until 2047 as he had predicted, but his epithet was wonderful. He wrote, "Turn off that subwoofer." So to start filling in more life stories, which would vary Stephen Hobish, I invite his sisters, Tova and Carol, to come forward.
Okay, you go first. Okay. Good job. Give me a minute. Yay. So many of you don't know, I'm the oldest. And I can't tell you anything about my brother that you don't already know as far as his adult life is concerned. But I have some stories. Okay, that's yeah. One is that my mother took us to see Fantasia once. And Gary was bored to death. He was not impressed with the dancing flowers, little fairies, or the happy bows. But when Night on Bald Mountain came around, and all the other kids in the theater were screaming and hiding, Gary was laughing his head off. He, yeah, that was Gary. He didn't change that. I also have a post from Gary's very first bandmate, Eric Miller, who is a guitar maker now up in Washington State. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to read the message that he sent me. Gary Hobish and I were kids when we started our first band. I was 12 and a half, and Gary was a year younger. There are so many stories to tell, but one that comes to mind paints a young Gary to a T. We were young and lucky enough to have parents who were willing and could afford to buy us our first instruments. Not terribly expensive, mind you, but professional quality. And the rest of the things you need, amplifiers to play electric guitars through, microphones to sing through. We never did get it together to get a PA system to handle vocals, just sang through mics plugged into our guitar amps. Not the best sound. But you use what you've got to the best of your ability. Anyway, of course, we had to start with one mic. And since most of what we performed involved harmony vocals, garlic and onion, the stinkiest you could imagine. Even better if the recipe contained vinegar. And of course, he'd gobble a bag of these down just before we were about to practice. Then share a mic with me. I think he thought the look on my face was me getting passionate about my singing. No. After a couple of practices like this, I finally let on and told him he had to stop doing that. I couldn't take his breath when he would belt out his parts mere inches from my face. Of course, he didn't stop. He'd just roll his eyes at the look on my face because he knew what I was bitching about. Then continue singing full force, maybe even turning it up a notch. Hello, Gary. I can't thank you all enough. The outpouring of love and support that we have had. And Gary's lived in San Francisco for over 40 years, so we didn't see each other as much as we would have liked in our adult lives. But growing up with him was a trip and a half. Thanks.
You couldn't tell I'm the younger, littler sister. In fact, I'm not at all like two of them. I'll start with a couple of stories that stand out to me growing up with my brother. One of them was, I might have been about 15 years old. I was invited to a pool party down the street. So I had my bathing suit on, I grabbed my towel, and I started walking down the street. And my mother told me later on, my brother was yelling at her, "You're gonna let her walk down the street dressed like that?" Okay. Another one, now, if many of you have been to my brother's apartment, many of you have seen my brother's room. When my brother was a teenager, my mother would try to get him to clean his room, and he would never clean his room. And his desk was covered with these tiny little audio things and wires and all this stuff. And one day she just said, "I'm coming in here in an hour."
Meeting, Gary, I don't know it. I don't know how to get it.
It's the garbage. He cleaned his room so fast.
Be on Zoom.
Why can't you watch it with me?
They might have it on this. I wonder if they could both watch it.
But why can't you just get the number that you had?
Here, whoever
Because
puts
I Zoom thing, I can't go back into it to get the rest of the number.
sorry.
That's
I don't know.
It's fine. As my sister said,
Ooh,
when I got this call from Diane, I was sitting in a diner in Richfield, Connecticut, waiting to go see a Brian Stokes Mitchell concert, not expecting this type of phone call. I didn't know what I was going to do. I called my sister, we made our plans to come out. Before we came out, we had a place to stay, thanks to Rachel and Jeff, who have been friends, sister, brother, family, chauffeur, everything to us, and we could not have done anything without them. I knew my brother had a lot of friends. I've always known my brother had a lot of friends. He's had his friends all moved out here from college together, still those friends, others, the outreach, the love, the admiration, the things people say to us. I had said to someone last night, I'm not gonna sit a traditional shiva because I just moved where I live. I don't have a lot of friends. Nobody's gonna come, and I'm not gonna do it. And he said, "Well, look around because this is your shiva." Last night was unbelievable, and we can't thank you all enough. I'm the youngest, Tova's the oldest, which makes Gary the middle child. So he was the middle child and he was the only boy, so that started him off in life. The fact that there are people here who have known and loved Gary for over 50 years speaks to the kind of person he was. He was unbelievably talented. I was so proud of him. And he loved to share his knowledge with whoever wanted to learn, which is not something I knew until I came out here this week, quite honestly. His childhood friend called him, well, the same one, Ricky, who was his bandmate when he was 11, called him I lost my place, give me 1 minute. He called him a creative engine. He loved what he did for a living and he never wavered, even when others would have given up and moved on. Gary didn't make a monetary rich life, but you all proved what a rich life he had. He was single-minded that way, like our father. He was just like our father, he looked like him, and he acted like him. All of these various communities that you all represent speak to the rich life he had. We knew about Gary's varied interests and hobbies, but in the last few days, we've been blown away by the sheer numbers of people who have paid their respects, whether it be on Facebook, his page, my page, today's mug, Tova's page. He was 70 years old. He was too young. And we are very proud to call him our brother. And we will always love him, and we will always miss him.
As Gary's life was centered around music, I would like to share Psalm 150, which is also centered around music and is known as the Hallelujah Psalm. Let your breath sing out, release your energy, let go of your anger, your fear. Take in the wonders and gifts of the universe. Be present so you can be thankful for all that has been created. Sing praises with your voice, sing praises through your actions. Rouse your spirit with shofar blasts. Awaken your soul through strumming heartstrings. Dance, be exuberant. Let your laugh reverberate like the clang of cymbals. Every molecule of your being will be unencumbered and refreshed. Breathe so that all is invigorated. May your gratitude overflow. Hallelujah. As a colleague once shared with me, we welcome people into the world and we escort them out. By gathering today and hearing some memories of Gary, he will forever be a part of our memories. Gary's memory will live on with everyone who knew him. Zechronali Bracha, Gary's memory will continue with us as an everlasting blessing. It's said that it's all right to put the weight of the world on your shoulders sometimes, if you know how to take it off. To take the weight of the world off of our shoulders at times of mourning, we recite a centuries-old prayer, the mourner's Kaddish. The Kaddish makes no mention of death. Rather, we recite praises to God. Most people question the meaning and the maker of life when confronted with death. The Kaddish prayer praises the source of the universe and concludes with a plea for peace. Hopefully, when you walked in, you're sitting near someone, one of these little, called a Kaddish card. It's in Hebrew, which is actually Aramaic on one side, transliterated on the other. There's more right by the door. Thank you for passing those out if anybody would like one. So I ask everyone to please rise. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Yimei Rabban. Ve'al Yisrael, Yitkadei, Yimei Malchutei, V'chai Yisrael, V'chai V'chal, V'Yisrael. Yehesh me Rabban Nekora, Le'olam Amai. Yitbarach, Yishbarach, 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 Yisrael. Yitbarach, 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 Shirei, Yishon, Le'olam, Yikol, Yikachal, Shirei. Turishtabata, Venetamata, the Amiran, the Allah, the Ibrim, Amen. Yehesh Rabban in Shinall, the Aleinu, the Alcohol, Israel, the Ibrim, Amen. Hosea, the Lord, the Rabban, who say the Shalom Aleinu, the Alcohol, Israel, the Ibrim, Amen. Please remain standing. Oh God, as we stand here together, we pray that we may be able to sustain the positive memories Gary has left for us. May the soul of our dear one be at rest and at peace with you forever. As you remain standing, I will recite another traditional prayer, El Milarachamim, which translates as God, full of compassion. It is taught as Gary's soul is released from its earthly bonds, given over to the care of God. The prayer expresses our desire that Gary will be granted eternal peace. Compassionate source of all that is, who is present in the heavens, take our beloved one, Gershon Shmuel, son of Yisrael and Russia Etta, under your holy, pure, and glorious wings that shine like the sky. Compassionate one, provide rest for the soul of our loved one, and never withdraw your protective wings. Bundle this soul into the bond of life, with God as the soul's everlasting inheritance and peaceful resting place. Let us say together, Amen.
Amen.
You may be seated. And prior to concluding this portion of the funeral service, I would like to recite one sentence in Hebrew words traditionally said to console mourners. In English, the sentences may be eternal, comfort you together with all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem and throughout the world. Amakom Yeneth Emeth Hem, the Tok Sha'ar Lezion, Yerushalayim, Ha'olam. Although I'm guessing the line Gary would have quoted would have been this one from Groucho Marx. I had a perfectly wonderful evening, but this wasn't it. Thank you all for participating in Gary's funeral service, supporting his sisters as well as each other. Gary's memory will be able to be for all. Thank you. Carol and Tova really have felt so supported by you and would love to hear some stories. Nothing wrong. But something that you think that really reminds you of an interaction with Gary, for when he was sharing these little storiettes, then we all get a better idea of Gary, and we all have more shared stories to go forward. So I don't know if there'll be one of you or lots of you who care to speak. So for everybody not to just rush forward, you might want to start. Great, we have a gentleman here. And then there is room on the side of the pews if you want to start kind of queuing, or maybe in the front. Maybe it's easier in the aisle here to get through, in the center aisle. So please.
My name is Gordon. I had the pleasure of playing with Gary in a Yes cover band for the last 10 years. And Gary was always just like one of the most decent humans I've ever known. And we had our own little room at Jamison's house, at Carla's house. She sings in our group on Monday night, where we had some people over, and we were all really looking forward to him becoming a grumpy old man. And we gave him the nickname Swedish curmudgeon before the night was over. But I just want to let everybody know that, yeah, he, as far as I know, he was just a great, decent human being.
Thank you.
I want to give it to you for going first. That was very brave of you. I'm Rachel, and I'm a friend of Gary's through swing dancing, but also through our love of live music. I remember one time I was telling Gary, well, some people like me, some people don't. And he said, well, Rachel, you do take some getting used to. you don't need that. And one thing about really great about Gary was what a sweetheart he was, but he was just like a good bagel. You know, he had that crusty exterior. And he was very fanatical about the bagels and how they had to be just so, just like with the music. He was a perfectionist. One thing about Gary is he had very high standards and he would go to a lot of shows and a lot of events. But if you were at an event where Gary was, you knew what was happening. You knew you were at the right event, whether it was Lincoln in the Park or the music that he chose. Another thing about him was just how funny he was. I mean, he was such a great hang, and that was one of the expressions he would use for other people too. He was very positive in that way, and he was just so fun to hang out with. Not just, I mean, of course, he was an excellent musician, a wonderful dancer, a great sound engineer. He was so talented in so many ways. But one of the things that's taken for granted is just the talent of being able to enjoy someone's company and have fun, having a brunch together or a lunch together, or what I call the Lindy in the Park afterglow, you know, the meals after Lindy in the Park. And just a couple of weeks before he passed, my friends Tom and Elizabeth and Jeff and I, you know, the five of us, we all lived in the neighborhood. We went to the Liberties for swing dancing. I had wonderful dances with Gary and live music, of course. And then we all went to Noe Valley for dessert at Mama Hoo Hoo. He loved the name of that. He'd never been. And we went for dessert, and the five of us just had the most hilarious conversation. We were laughing so hard we cried because he was talking about Bob's Donuts and how he liked to go there after the Red Devil Lounge back in the day when it was open, and how he was saying how he loved to go after the Red Devil Lounge because at like at 2 a.m. that's when the French crullers would come out of the hot oil. The French crullers, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right because Gary corrected me. And he was like, no, that's not how you pronounce it. And then the funny thing about this curmudgeon thing is that, of course, then people would double down on whatever it was, right? So, you know, I started speaking in a German accent, and but we thought when he said that's when the hot crullers and the French crullers come out, we thought he was talking about something like rock, you know, the rockers and the mods and the punks and you know the French crullers. It was like the rock and rollers. So Elizabeth and I both thought when he said that's when the French crullers come out. We thought it was like a group, you know. He's like, no, crullers is a type of donut. You know. And it was just hilarious. I don't know, but yeah, that was Gary. So thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. My own life is a hard act to follow, but I took to do so. I'm Jeff. Rachel's my wife. We got to meet company the sisters recently. You know, we bonded. There's just certain things. I guess the thing is, I met Gary while swing dancing, and then we discovered we had all this mutual history. I was really surprised by it. He knew musicians I had known, you know, he knew bands I had seen. We bonded at the fact that we saw NRBQ in 1985 at the Stone in San Francisco. I didn't know him then, but we both at that show. And through that was a sort of a multi-dimensional friendship where there was dancing, there was music, and then on top of that, he was in one cover band, I was in another cover band, and we played lots of shows together. We played Sacramento, we played Sunnyvale, we played the Berkeley Square, and he was always generous with technical help. I mean, I don't want to get too geeky, but he mixed the live sound for me, and there's one song where there's obviously a bad bass note. He went and corrected the pitch. Well, that makes me look good, you know. And you know, he gave it to me. There you go, free of charge. I go, okay. So he's always being very helpful. And then the third thing is he was starting to mentor me in the live sound. I interacted with him, you know, at the Birdie Club. That was what we were trying to do. He's always generous with showing me how, you know, to set up certain things. And, you know, he would always have the Gary advice, like, don't rush, you know, don't rush, or whatever. And of course, his epitaph is very fitting because, as you know, if you go to a show, he will tell you what frequencies is disturbing him at the show. I think it was 200, was it? 200 hertz? Okay. Yeah, about 200 hertz. was his trouble spot, but at the same time, I went to a show where it sounded great, we were both in agreement, like, wow, it sounds amazing. And I have to say, the Chills at Chapel 2 years ago was that example, for those of you who knew that. So, you know, we were able to bond all these things, and on top of that, it was our neighbor, so we went back and forth. So, you know, it's the loss was immense, you know, and you know, we're just glad we're able to help the sisters out, you know, whatever we can do. So once again, you know, lots of people have, Gary knows lots of people in different places. He's an audio engineer for 30 years. He worked at Fantasy. He worked at CD Presents. For those of you who don't know his legacy, he did mastering of like classic jazz records. You know, he recorded tons of punk bands. He worked with Greg Kihn. Those are just, you know, not to single like Greg Kihn, like he's a great example, but that was sort of the first thing I could think of, actually. Yeah, he talked about doing drugs with Greg Kihn. Okay, so and the infamous cocaine graphic too. You guys know what I'm talking about. If you're in cocaine, your YouTube career is a little bizarre. Anyway, this is all said in private. But anyway, so you know, those are more stories, you know, and frightful war stories about, you know, working with CD record bosses and things. So he, you know, he went through quite a career, his music career. And I'm just sort of honored to have known him and actually to have him to include some knowledge. And on top of that, he was my IT guy who told me what computers to buy and how to fix it up. So anyway, that's all we can say is sort of a rush to disorganized thought. But thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Honestly, that's partner of him. There's a difference. This is what he wrote to me when my father died. The sadness of your loss will never be gone, but soon it will take a back seat to memories of humor and love. He was like that to me. I think he's gonna be better.
So I met Gary in 89, 90-ish. I was playing a gig at the Albion, and he was there, and I played my set and my keyboard broke. He fixed it. And I played the rest of my set, and then he gave me a review of my set. And he said, and it was parsed out into keyboard skills, vocal skills, songwriting skills. I was like, wow, thanks. 2 years later, he was in my band. And montage of 30 years, he's still giving me reviews. I know he wants me to redo the vocals on our latest recording. I will, Gary, I will recut them all. But I'd like to zoom in on a couple stories during our 30 years playing together. We had a lot of catchphrases, and I can't even think of them all right now because my head is blown. But one of them, I don't know the origin, but it had to do with how annoyed and indignant, yeah, Gary could get. But the phrase was somehow perversely, it's a sad day when Gary Hobish is the voice of reason. Of course, if I trotted it, and this went on for years, if I trotted it out at the wrong time, Gary would be like, not ironic enough. I didn't yell at the sound man. But I think the time that we used it, we were on the road with Andrew, and we had a big fight about pizza. And we couldn't agree on what pizza. I mean, food, as all y'all know, very important to Gary. Yeah. But Andrew and I as well, and there was doors slammed about pizza toppings. And then Gary calmed us down, and it was like, it's a bad day. Gary Hobish is the voice. I don't know how to sum it all up. It seemed like a second ago that he was fixing my keyboard at the Albion. I'm so lucky to have known someone so brilliant, and we shared this project. We've worked on our music for 30 years. We were both engaged, and everyone that we played with, we were engaged in this project. I was looking through our blogs, and I found a blog post that Gary did, and he said, now, I don't know if some of you guys don't know Andrew Bacon, but Andrew was the drummer for the last 10 years or so. But Gary said, Margaret keeps me interested, and Andrew keeps me on my toes. I thought that was very sweet. But we're all so lucky to have known him, and he gave so much of himself to all of us. I love you, Gary.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott, or as Gary knew me when we first met 34 years ago, F. Scott Brown. Because he came in my life by entering an ad, and he was roommate with a woman who was soon to be my ex-wife and another woman whose heart I totally broke. And Gary. So our relationship started off tentative, to say the least, because he knew who he had to see every day, and the schmuck would come around for a party. So he was smart about it. But he became part of our family. And we host a St. Patrick's Day party at my house. Gary would always come. And Gary is the only person I would let in the kitchen to help, because he knew what he was doing. And, it dawned on me one day, this man's an artist, and not just, in music, which I was always like, oh yeah, you're in music, you have bands, da 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 da. The first time I heard Pin Splat play at an epic party in Sonoma, I was blown away. So he's been a part of our family. He was there when both my kids were born. He was one of the first people to come see my daughter, my first child. He was, when my wife became ill, he was, which by the way, she was one of the roommates, beautiful, intelligent, but very questionable face, because she said yes. But when she became ill, he would call, he'd come by. This is sort of, at St. Patrick's Day party, I am, 3 sheets to the wind. Gary asked where the bathroom is, and I'm like, well, you know where it is, downstairs, go ahead. And you have to walk through our home office. And I'm like, I feel a nature's call, so I go downstairs, and there's Gary under my desk, rewiring my iMac setup. I'm like, what the hell are you doing, Gary? Because it wasn't right. I've heard people say he could be a curmudgeon. He absolutely could be a curmudgeon. He was very witty, but he also, at another different St. Patrick's Day party, and this was a fairly recent. I was complaining about something very minor, light thing, but of course, I'm Irish American and from the Sunset in San Francisco, so I'm making it sound like a war crime. And Gary suddenly thinks that we're playing that great East Coast game of, oh, you think that's bad? And he jumps in before I get to my punchline, which, if you guys don't know it, Gary was so hooked into the comedy scene in San Francisco in the early 90s. I mean, Yeah, and a whole different group of stories. But so Gary starts telling his story about how horrible this. I think he had a hangnail that got caught on a sock. That's what I remember. And I'm already decided my revenge is going to be. And he gets done, and you know, because it's going to kill him. This hangnail, he just knows it's going to kill him. And I'm like, Gary, don't worry about it. You're going to live forever because God hates you. And I thought about that this week, and it actually made me re-examine some stuff because I was so wrong. The question that came to mind was, how was he allowed to be here? Because all these qualities, why wouldn't the divine want that next to him? Why would he leave him for so long? But the thing that really upset me was somebody mentioned Bob's Donuts. Gary and I had an epic fight because the old-fashioned donut at Bob's, plain, not glazed, is the finest expression of a donut and a true test of a master. And Gary went on about his French food. So.
Whatever the result.
Yeah, it's like, you know, okay. So there are some things I never argued with Gary about. Music, morals, ethics. I am a little challenged in those areas. So, but that man was a North Star. And I think a lot of people, without knowing it or acknowledging, got to set their sail by. So, thank you.
So I owe Gary like a huge debt of gratitude. He helped me kind of develop as a human being. I've known him for over 30 years, more than half my life. And he kind of snuck in there and assumed the role of mentor. And I don't know how I would be here. He was always there to support every band that I was in True Margaret for a little while, and being a drummer in a band with Gary when you're, you know, still learning the trade, it was challenging. And you know, on stage, I was cued at every transition quite visibly. So yeah, I think the audience could have played the drums. Everybody was there drumming. And bless him though, because I think without his support, I wouldn't be making my living as an engineer at this point. Not to make it about me, but yeah, I was always able to take on projects that were a little beyond my reach, knowing that I had Gary on my squad, because he always helped me deliver. And he was never, ever like, I mean, he always made sure that he was right, you know, that I knew that he was right, but usually was. And it was very rare that when it came to music production that he was wrong. And my members of my band Griddle are here today, and he kind of adopted he was like the 5th Griddler, and he was there as like our mastering engineer on our records and mixed one of them. And I think he came to every show for about a decade. It's safe to say. I think there's a big hole in my world right now as I'm, you know, continuing to work on projects at the studio and thinking, okay, now what? When it's time to master. This week we had 2 releases of albums that we recorded at the studio at High Street where I work, and Gary mastered. The last few days were release parties for albums that got finished by Gary, and that's true for most of the records that I've been a part of making. And I've lost count of how many that Gary helped me finish at this point. So I want to thank all of you guys for, you know, being part of Gary's life, because he was like the most social person I've ever known. Like he wanted to be there every time. And I have one thing I'm gonna leave you with, which is like, he did this thing where he always bought extra tickets when he was gonna go to a show. And I think probably many of us in this room were benefited from that. My most recent one was he took me to see the Roxy Music and St. Vincent show at the Chase Arena not that long ago. And we complained about the subwoofer being too loud. It pretty much ruined that part of the evening for both. Fortunately, Roxy Music had a better mix going on where the kick drum didn't dominate. So I would just ask, when you buy tickets to the next show you go to, get an extra ticket with no idea who's gonna get it, and give it to somebody that you love. Because Gary did that all the time.
Hi, my name is Melissa, and I'm gonna represent the film part of Gary's life. We've worked with dancers and musicians, and so I'm one of the co-founders of the San Francisco Silent Film Festival. And Gary, at first, I think it was about 20 years ago, volunteered with us. He was stuffing envelopes in my apartment when we first started. And he became the sound engineer and worked tirelessly until this day for the festival. And he made, strangely, the silent film festival, you wouldn't think that it needs any kind of audio, but it made a difference between us being professional and non-professional, like all of our musicians that we had to do. He was doing as much work as possible to make them sound good, all of our speakers, and he was tireless. I mean, he you know, he was there when necessary, you know, late into the night, whatever he needed to do. So he also, I had no idea, was so humble and he knew so many different people. I did not know until just the day that he knew Greg King, which I wish I would have known because when I was a teenager, I had Greg King concerts all the time. So I was like, have the dirt, but whatever. So in February, my husband, who's the co-founder of the Silent Film Festival, died as well. So there are a couple of us in this room that this is our second funeral of the year. Gary and Steve got along amazingly. So I'm just thinking that Steve was up there somewhere and suddenly he's like, "Hi, Gary." Yeah, surprised to see him here. And I'm sure Gary's like, "Yeah, me too." But I'm sure they're having a wonderful time, and I hope to see them both again. And Gary was wonderful, so supportive of me all these years, part of the festival, and we really love them and miss them.
Patients, 17 of them died. The weather whiplash heading into the weekend of major change coming, and the storms in the Northwest. Also, today, the earthquake in California, we remember the famous aftermath here, and it was coming up tonight. Found 40 years later, the exclusive interview.
Nathan, big answer for Cat's Corner. I have quite a bit to say, so cut me off if I go too long. That was usually Gary's style at Cat's Corner. What's up like that? Gary, what a way to go. In a blaze of glory, dancing the Big Apple at Lydia in the Park on a gorgeous day, surrounded by friends. Your dance teacher, I feel a certain pride. Applauding the panache of your dramatic exits. I'm sure that you're up there somewhere glowing with pride too, grinning widely and gleefully recounting this comically morbid story to all the friends you've already made up there. I met you through dancing when my partner Katrina and I recruited you to run sound at our upstart dance party, Cat's Corner, and trade for dance classes.
You were there before our party even got big or popular, and you were a true hipster in that sense. And when you had taken all the dance classes we had to offer, there was no question in our minds, we had to hire you, you know, as our official sound engineer. Your expertise, professionalism, reliability, it was irreplaceable. And more than that, you got it. The music, the dancing, the people, the cocktails, the fun, the joy, and the community. You understood our mission because it was your mission too. When Katrine moved away years later, you stayed on. You were a steadying and integral partner behind the scenes. You were there with me every step of the way as we took our party from venue to venue, Balançoire, Ukrainian Hall, the Swedish Hall, the Valencia Room, and even online in our virtual Cat's Corner during the pandemic. You were the first person I called up when I wanted to check out a venue, because I relied on your pragmatic and your no-nonsense assessment. If you gave it the thumbs up, I was like, yeah, it's good enough for me too. I completely expected that you'd be there with me at the next life of Cat's Corner, and it'll be so strange to do it without you as my right-hand man. 17 years of working together, week after week, project after project, a person kind of grows on you. After the work was over, Gary was always up for the post-party diner hang or lunch after Lindy in the Park. That's where you get to know Gary's take on politics, movies, the music scene, the silent film festival, where the best Reuben sandwiches were, what constitutes a real bagel, and what he thought about Britney Spears playing on the background music at the restaurant. He loved to have fun, a man after my own heart. He was the MVP of the Cat's Corner trivia team, and one year he led us on to a victory in the citywide. I could tell that the Lindy Bowl events that we put on at Mission Bowling Club were special to him, and I imagine that they took him back to some earlier part of his life where he was just throwing strikes all the time. His annual Latka Fests were epic and delicious, and they were a place where you could see a cross-section of all the communities he was involved in commingling. He was a founding member of the Latka, and that was just the name of a group of friends that used to hang out at the Row Cuckoo with LeVay Smith and Chris Siebert, and we played percussion, and Gary would have these amazing bongo solos. And I was always happy to, you know, buy him a scotch or whiskey and have a drink with him there on those Sunday night hangs. He loved Indian food, like me. I mean, he kind of liked all food. But he had a special appreciation for Indian food, enough so that he'd hang out with Ken Watanabe and me after dancing late night at Nanan Curry. It was not his favorite restaurant. We didn't go there because the food was good. We went there because it was open. No offense to Nanan Curry. And every once in a while, I'd call Gary up and we'd meet up for some lunch or dinner in the Mission at a Doopy Palace and have dosas or biryani at Deck and Spice. He really liked Indian food. And sometimes I'd cook leftovers or take him some leftovers because I knew he'd like it. And he'd always thank me, and he'd tell me the story of like how he ate it, and he took the leftovers and mixed it with a little bit of that and that. You know, I just could tell that he appreciated that as much as I appreciated sharing it with him. And by the way, so very recently, a couple months back, he had mentioned that there was some new Indian restaurant out in the Mission that had opened up, and he really wanted to check it out with me because he knows that I have strong opinions about that. And I don't think he told me the name of it. So if anybody knows it, if he told it to anybody, please did he tell you, Tracy? You know, okay, please tell me because I want to go there in his honor. Yeah, but I'm regretting nothing to share that with him. So those one-on-one hangs with Gary, they're going to remain a special memory for me. They're outside of the dance world, away from work, and just some small moments that I could share with him and show my appreciation for all that he did for me, the support, the friendship, and love he's shown. And I could go on, but he was generous, he was kind, he was warm, he had a great sense of humor. He looked really good in his suit. He looked even better on the dance floor. The Lindy Hop community appreciates all the contributions that he made to our scene, and we'll miss him. I miss him tremendously. And my condolences to his family and all the friends gathered here, may he rest in peace.
Everyone, my name is Ken Watson. I've been swing dancer friend initially, we met, I think, at Cat's Corner. But we soon bonded over other things too. We were both huge Giants fans. That's how we really got to know each other. He invited me over to watch games at his place during the 2010 playoffs and World Series. We had some great memories from that, watching. He'd always prepare his special sausage and peppers and onions mix that he was so proud of, and it was good. It was really good. And I would bring the beer, and he'd do the sausage, and that was our ritual every game. We used to go to games too, in person. I'm gonna miss blaming each other for causing the Giants to lose. I think we've had a losing record, but it was still a great time to be with him, to share with him. I'm gonna miss a lot of things. I'm gonna miss his advice on all things technical, sound, Apple products, and I'm still using this 15-year-old Apple laptop that he found for me from his niece, I think. He had refurbished, and I'm still using it to this day. It's ancient, but it's still working. Thank you, Gary.
That was from college. That was from college.
Yeah. I think, yeah.
She's 33 now.
Yeah, I've had it for a while. I guess. I'm gonna miss all the hanging out with Gary. After dancing, after Giants games, we both love to eat and just hang out. He was such a generous guy. He'd always bring me back. I didn't have a car at the time for the longest time. He'd always make sure I got a ride home, or he would take me home on his own. Even after, spending late hours at the Royal Cuckoo till past midnight, he'd drive me home all the way across town. He lived only a couple blocks away, right? But from the Royal Cuckoo, I live in the inner Sunset across town. He didn't mind at all. He did always offer a ride. So I'm gonna miss those too, Gary. Gonna miss your laugh, your self-deprecating humor, and your not so self-deprecating humor too. But most of all, I think I'm gonna miss your generosity and your friendship. Thank you, Gary.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you. It's so wonderful to see you. Thank you for coming. My name is Jen Holland. A lot of people know me as Cut Jen. I met Gary about 17 or 18 years ago through our mutual friend, Diane Nola. Diane is a swing dancer, and she cut my hair at the time. Every time she cut my hair, she's like, my friend Gary would love Lydia. He would just love it. I kept hearing about my friend Gary this, my friend Gary that. And then finally, she just got him a gift certificate to Tuesday classes. And He just showed up and he was off and running, and he was out, and his enthusiasm just set him apart from everyone else, right? From the beginning. He was out on Tuesdays, every Tuesday. He was out on Wednesdays at Cat's Corner, every Wednesday. He was at Lindy in the Park every Sunday and hanging out with us afterwards, always up for going out to eat. Just a great personality. And that was the beginning. And then all these other things happened over the years. About 15 years ago, I was teaching a class of a dance called the Big Apple. And it's this big circle dance from the 1930s where everybody runs around and there's lots of jumping and hopping and all this kind of stuff. Gary had bad knees, right? He's always like, oh, my knees, oh, I gotta get this knee replaced and that knee replaced. He was determined to do that Big Apple. And I can't say that he loved the Big Apple, but it was like this mountain that he had to climb to do the Big Apple. And he was going to do it no matter the condition of his knees. And we had a big performance 15 years ago, and Gary was out there killing it on the Big Apple. He did fantastic, and it was recorded and it's out there on YouTube somewhere. So years went on, and we, I have to say, going out to eat with Gary was always such a wonderful thing, because you realize, oh my gosh, he has so many interests, so many things, the music, the recording studio, the bands that he worked with, the bands that he was in as a musician, True Margaret, Chandeliers, the Jars. I mean, the Silent Film Festival, the food, the restaurants, the cooking. For Vodka Fest every year. I mean, he was just that. And he took immense pride in everything that he did, everything. He was passionate about all of it. Gary, as he went on through the swing dancing time over the years, got more and more involved in, can I help? Can I help? Can I help you with this? Can I help you with that? He was tremendous at Cat's Corner when that venue was starting to do live music with different bands every week. He was giving them constant advice and feedback. He was instrumental in the San Francisco Lindy Exchange. He helped us bring live music to Lindy in the Park. He was on every band we ever had at Lindy in the Park. Gary was on sound, every single one. At the Woodchopper's Ball, more recently at the Verdi Club. Yeah, he deserves so much credit for bringing live music to the swing scene. I see many band members out there. We're so lucky that Gary was with us and supported all of us in what he did. Gary was a tremendous friend in dark times, COVID times, death of our parents, and so on. He was a tremendous friend on just a very quiet, personal level. It would be a tough time. Call me up and say, hey Jen, how you doing? And we talked on the phone for an hour and a half. He was tremendous, tremendously supportive. In more recent times, when Lindy in the Park opened again after 2.5 years ago after COVID, Ken and I were overwhelmed. We had so many people. We were just running around like chickens with our heads cut off, and Gary was like, how can I help? Can I help you guys? And we're like, well, yeah, you could MC. And he's like, what? Me with a microphone? Just from day one, just relished that role, and he took so much pride in it, and he loved being out there and the first to introduce all of this to whole new crowds every Sunday. He was a constant host, and just he did fabulous with it all along. Because of that increased involvement and his involvement with Woodchopper's Ball, he has been training audio engineers of the next generation. He worked with the City College program and had a number of interns that were working with him, both at Woodchopper's Ball and at the Silent Film Festival, really bringing up a new generation and sharing his knowledge and his expertise. And it was tremendous to see. I've had the great privilege of working with Gary professionally so much over the last 2.5 years. Several times a week, we've been constantly in contact about all kinds of things. And he's just a pleasure to work with, a true professional. He had he had high standards, an outstanding work ethic. He was so supportive of so many events, which all of us in this room have felt so many times. And always willing to jump in and help out. I want to talk about Sunday at Linnean Park. This last Sunday, a few days ago, okay? It was a beautiful day. I had to take a couple breaks from Linnean Park, and I came back to Linnean Park because I saw Gary in the park. He's like, "Welcome back!" And he asked me to dance, and we went out and had a great dance. Gary danced a lot on Sunday. He was smiling. He was happy. He ate a hot dog. A couple of his favorite dance partners were out, and he danced with them. Lisa Buchanan, Catherine McCormick. He was having a great day, emceeing, relishing in every bit of it. And at Linnean Park, we do a group dance about 1:20 every Sunday, and it just so happened that the group dance this Sunday was the Big Apple. The Big Apple, that big group dance that he wanted to learn so bad 15 years ago. Despite all of his health issues, he was gonna do the Big Apple, and of course, he went out there and did the Big Apple this Sunday, with about 20 of us in front of a huge group of people. We made it almost all the way through, and then Gary was down, and that was it. Gary died as he lived. He was doing something he loved to do, and he was surrounded by people who loved him. I wish it had some more than that. Should all be so much. Gary, we're with you. We're all here with you. Thank you for the gift of your presence in our lives. Thank you for inspiring us. All of us now, it's our job to carry forth in this world. Go on with your projects. Keep working on it. Keep your standards high. Let's do it. Let's live Gary in who we are and all the creative things that we do, and keep him at the front of the mind. Oh, Mrs. Lab, we had so many years with Gary, and we were so lucky to have him for so many years. And we still wish we had more time with him. Thank you everyone for coming. When we leave here today, turn to the person next to you that you don't know and ask them, how did you know Gary? And start those conversations, and let's keep Gary's spirit alive. Let's tell those stories. There's so many stories and they're so funny. You know, we're gonna go to the Royal Cuckoo afterwards in the mission. The missionary Cesar Chavez, come join us. Let's hang out. Let's talk about Gary and be with his spirit. And thank you so much for coming. Next. I guess if nobody else is going to do
I just want to quickly say my name is Rob Geller, and Gary, I've known Gary since for 40 years, back when he was in the Jars. I went to UC Berkeley and skipped a lot of lectures and saw the Jars play in Small Plaza. And I became a really big fan of all those Berkeley bands, and I knew Gary was working over at Fantasy, but he gave me my first studio job. He was studio manager at CD Studio, and he gave me a chance, I think, on Sylvia Massey's recommendation, and he gave me a chance and taught me everything. One thing that Gary was great at was you really knew how to mic things to sound good, and he taught me that, and that is something that I use throughout my life to this day. And And it was really funny, so Gary and I worked side by side with him for hundreds of hours on, projects too numerous to mention. And, he gave me a lot of chances to take my first chances to actually engineer sessions on my own, punk rock, rap for rap music for rap people, volume 3. And then, you know, his hiring me there really, changed my whole life. I mean, the trajectory of my life. Ultimately, in the studio, I met Margaret. And, through Margaret, I met my wife and had kids. And, a lot of reminded me actually this morning on my way that the last time I saw Gary was at Flower Piano, last month. And, it's one of those things that happens, but, I was just kind of in a crap mood. Gary was talking to somebody and I didn't want to interrupt him, but, so I didn't actually go up to him. Who would know it was the last time I'd ever see him? You know, I guess the lesson in that is, you know, when you see somebody, go up to them, you know, because you just never really know. But, it was 20 years later, after we were working together. I was a big fan of the Jars, and one day, at the time, back in the early 80s, and one day, Gary comes up to me and says, "Hey, Bob, come look at this." And he hands me this fan letter that I had written to the Jars, like 15 years ago. And he saved everything, I guess. He had a really deep archive. And I mean, losing him is really losing a lot of institutional memory of, you know, the music scene in this town. He was there. I mean, he mastered so many things. You know, he was always there to master my productions. And so just recently, just last year, he mastered something that my friend Matt and I finally put out after 30 years. Lethal Gospel album. And Gary really made it shine. He was just an incredible guy. I really, you know, he's one of those people you just take for granted is going to be there. And well, he's not here now. One of the things I just leave you with one funny anecdote which was very telling about him. He came to my daughter Sophia's bat mitzvah at Shahar Zahav over here. And he was always really good about that. He was just such a good friend, and he'd show up. He would just show up, whatever it was, you know. And anyway, at one point after the service, we were playing some songs, you know, on the acoustic guitar, playing some folk songs, Jewish songs, and children's songs, and it was fun. And Gary comes up to me, "Hey Bob, let's take some action. Take some action." In the synagogue. Anyway, we didn't do it. Gary, you know, we did play it outside in the parking lot later on, but that was Gary. He was very irreverent, you know. I learned how to play Take Some Action because Gary hired me to do the X Groovies album, and I ended up touring, and Chris Wilson showed me how to play that song. But anyway, Gary, I love you. There's so much to say, and maybe later on I'll be able to tell some more stories. But yeah, Gary Hobish was a great guy, and we're all going to miss him. Thanks.
I'll keep this pretty short. I've known Gary a comparatively short period of time. I started working for him at the Silent Film Festival in 2010. I guess the first memory that stands out to me is this event that exhausted me when I started working it in my 20s. Gary was there every minute of it. He was staying up later, sending emails, responding to artists, working late into the night, you know, making sure every detail was perfect. And he also somehow managed to go to usually at least 2 more parties, a concert, and a couple swing dancing events over the course of the week-long festival. I don't know how he did it. It was amazing. I've been, you know, wanting to call him all week just to ask some questions. I was, you know, as always, I felt
So, I left San Francisco years ago, and I've been coming into the city to work the festival since, and staying with Gary in his apartment while we do that. It's been a wonderful opportunity to know him, know this person. Like I said, full of knowledge, so many things I want to talk to him about, and so many things I was absolutely terrified to talk to him about. And not because I disagreed with him on the subject either. I just knew he was going to be very passionate about it. I did hear about French colors, say that on more than one occasion. There were a lot of people he mentored, and I just want to make sure everyone here knows there are, more than I'm going to bother to count out right now that we're not able to come here because they are out working, and practicing the craft that Gary taught them.
Hello, my name is Kevin, and I had the honor of being Gary's friend for more than 20 years. One of the most generous people I've ever known, generous with his humor, with his latkes, with his vast knowledge of music. He was the person that would find that out of print pub rock record from 1976 that you have to hear, and he was always choosing the right records for that. Just an incredibly generous, wonderful human being. And he was also someone who lived in San Francisco, but was not reluctant to come to the East Bay to go to shows. Thank you, Gary. So I got to see a lot of comedy with him and a lot of live music. And I went to go see a fantastic show in Lafayette with him recently, and he told me a joke at the end of the show. And the joke was this. So, there's a musician whose father has died. The musician is headed to the cemetery to visit the gravesite. Parks his car, looks and sees where his father's headstone is, walking toward the headstone. And he sees someone else walking up to the headstone and placing a single Tootsie Roll on top of the headstone. As he approaches, the other man turns around. He says, "Excuse me, did you know my father?" And the other guy says, "Oh, hi, I'm Bob from Sweetwater." Thank you, Gary, for everything. We love you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Cooper.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Of course, none of us were prepared to say anything. I do want to tell you a few stories about Gary. One time, he was driving me to a Giants game. We were both going to a game. He had an extra ticket, like he always gets extra tickets. And in the car there, we pulled up to a stop sign, and another car pulled up right next to us. And it was literally falling apart because the bass, someone had turned up the bass super loud in that car, and all you can hear is boom, boom, boom. The car's literally rattling, shaking apart. Gary and I can't even talk, it's so loud. The car pulls off into the distance, and Gary says, "Gosh, I love a good melody." That was one of his key lines that he would say often when we're backstage. I'm a sound engineer, mentored by Gary, and whenever there's a wrong note or anything, we're in the back of the room complaining about various frequencies. Gosh, I love a good melody. So it's surprising me that I didn't know Gary longer. I worked for a man named Rob Byrne, who is the president of the Sinai Film Festival, and I remember walking into his office for my review or just to meet with him. And right on the front door there was a poster for the Sinai Film Festival. And this is 2006. I did not know Gary then. I should have. My first time meeting Gary, I'm not certain even if he were here, he would know what that day was, but I didn't know what that day was. It was in 2009 at the San Francisco Lindy Exchange, 2009. And Gary was doing the sound. And it was very tough in that room. That room was so hard to mix. It was just echoed for days. The walls were super hard. There was no carpet on the floor. And there was just feedback starting to come from the drums. And it was Gordon Webster, who's an amazing dance musician and pianist. And I walked up to the sound guy and said, you know, there's like the tom-tom is reverberating and feeding back through the monitor. And Gary got very surly. Surly, yeah. That's just how it was, but I'm appreciative that he did not get super mad, but that was his way, and he was very particular about things. And boy, it is just really hard to say something these days. But it did occur to me days ago when I was thinking through this process that we often try to value our lives on our accomplishments. And of course, Gary had many, but I think the true measure of a person is the friends and the giant holes in our lives that they leave behind. And I'm pretty proud to be of this community. So thank you all.
So our time is up here in the room. As was said, we're going to the Royal Cuckoo. I keep saying Cuckoo's Nest, but Royal Cuckoo. So like down. You could have said a lot more to me than that. I remember, well, no, I'll just say something to do with Ryan. He was telling me about a cornbread that he was making, and he was, you know, he was a cook, and he put everything foodie, everything in it. He made this kind of cornbread and that kind of cornbread, and I said, I just like plain cornbread. I'm a purist. And he looked at me like I had 3 heads. But at any rate, we're going over there after here. Everybody is obviously welcome to come. We want to thank you again, my sister Tova and I. This is just, I can't, there's no words, so just thank you. So,
Here she comes again.
Wait. So, obviously, Gary's not here, but his ashes are here. There are several people who have asked me for some ashes to spread somewhere that they knew meant something to Gary. I know I'm going to give some to Jen for the park. I'm going to take some and mail them down to anyone who knows Aurora down in Prague on the ranch. She reached out to me. She'd like to have someone spread them where he was there. I mean, honestly, I made it with Diane, a BUOB, you could bring your own bag. I don't want to, oh, and then Rachel had said, I'll do it at the Royal Cuckoo. I honestly don't want to be inundated, and it's gotta be something really special to him, someplace that, you know, you're gonna tell me and it's gonna hit me, or don't be insulted if it doesn't. I just can't imagine like doing this with 100 people, you know? So I appreciate anybody's suggestions, and like I said, if my sister and I don't want to go along with something, don't be insulted. It's just that I feel most of him should go to the park, actually. That's my opinion. And then, like I said, a small amount will go to Florida. But if anyone has any ideas they'd like to share with us later on today, we'd be welcome to hear. Thank you.